Welcome to The Married Therapist,
a relationship podcast
hosted by us, Luis and Amber Simide.
This podcast is all about love, conflict, and the gray areas.
If you like what you hear, be sure to like and subscribe wherever you're listening. Now let's get to the show. Welcome back. Today we are going to talk about finances. This is an extremely important topic because it is consistently one of the top 3 reasons that people either get divorced or break up because of issues with finances. And there are some stats that say 20 to 40% of all breakups and divorces are because of finances. So this is something that we are really passionate about. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how finances looked growing up, what example was set for us, and then talk about how we do it in our own marriage. And then at the end, we're going to do another Reddit story that deals with finances and all the shenanigans that happened in that story. So start with you. What was your example growing up? How did you see that? What was the example for you?
So to start off, I think it's important to share that I come from a family of 8. There's 6 kids.
Yes.
Lots of mouths to feed. When I go back to my childhood and I try to figure out, like, what did I witness financially, I'm not quite sure because there wasn't a ton. I do remember the feeling, though, and that was I felt like a burden because when we would go out, someone would complain that the bill was too high.
Gotcha.
And I just remember being like, well, why are we even here?
Yeah.
And we didn't go out a ton, but we still did, especially as I got older. And that just made me be like, you know what? When I grow up, I don't ever want my kids to feel like that.
Yeah.
And then, so another thing that I'm just remembering is summer camp. My sisters and I loved watching Bug Juice, which these kids spent like an entire summer in this bomb summer camp in Maine.
Yes.
Where they had all the fun things, the water sports and the talent shows and every little fun activity that you can imagine.
Yeah.
Of course, that is an extreme situation. But I would be willing to accept anything.
Yeah.
Any tiny little thing. And it just made me think, hey, where is my Bug Juice equivalent?
Yeah.
And then another thing that I'm just remembering is schooling. So I was homeschooled from 8th grade all the way to 12th. I did go to the DoD school, which was like the military school from the time I was in kindergarten until 7th grade. But then after 7th grade, when I was in Japan, my dad retired. We moved to Hawaii for the 3rd time. And we became homeschooled just because the school system in Hawaii at the time wasn't the best.
Yeah.
And my sisters and I, the older ones, we kind of were getting into some little shenanigans.
Uh-oh.
And my mom was like, immediately no. So homeschool USA is your path.
Yeah.
Which we all hated. I know for me, I call myself an extreme extrovert.
Yeah.
I always say I'm like, Ariel, I want to be where the people are.
But that was just for you and your twin, though, right?
No, we all were homeschooled.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then we all were homeschooled for a year. And then after that, my little sister and my older sister, they went to a private academy. And my twin sister and I were unable to go because we didn't have the money.
Yeah.
And it was expensive. So it makes sense. And I later found out there were some financial issues going on behind the scenes that I wasn't aware of. But that was another moment where I realized that finances was an issue, and I felt sad about it because that kept me from going to school with my friends and being able to participate in extracurricular activities and things like that. So those are a couple of moments that stand out when it comes to finances growing up. I will say it was interesting because finances wasn't discussed.
Okay, that was going to be my next question. Like, did you guys ever talk about finances and all of that?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, so it just simply wasn't discussed. Point blank period. So what about you?
So for me, it was similar. My dad was also in the military, he was in the Army, and he was enlisted, and my mom just worked in a bank. She was a bank teller. So that was really where the money was coming from. So, I would say maybe middle class. I don't really know what that would qualify as, So it was a fairly normal upbringing financially. So I never really felt like we didn't have money, but I also knew that we weren't like rich. So, growing up, I never really we were able to go out to eat every once in a while, but not to like sit down in restaurants. Granted, we're three boys who were all young. That's probably not ideal anyway. But yeah, as far as going out to eat, there was always food at the house because that's one, my mom liked to cook. So we ate at home most of the time, but also financially, it's just easier that way. But as far as experiences and things like that, honestly, I feel like we did a lot. And looking back, I don't know how we did it. So I don't know if they just budgeted really well or if it was all on credit cards or what the situation was. But yeah, we were able to experience life pretty well. Like when we lived in Hawaii, we went to the Big Island once, we went to the Maui once, took vacations to Florida and New York one time. So we didn't just like stay home all the time. And we were always doing things around the island. My dad loved to go out and explore wherever we were living. So that was really my experience growing up. But we didn't have conversations about money. There was no financial literacy talk at all. It was more so just be a kid, go to school, all of that. And yeah, went to just regular public school. So there was no financial obligation with schooling at all. And growing up after that, like when I got to middle school and my parents were not together anymore, that's when we started to feel financial things happening because again there's just one income. So that's when I became aware of finances and what that entails and what we could or couldn't do. But again, there was still no conversation about financial literacy and all of that. It was more so just kind of get what you need. And so I didn't grow up necessarily wanting a lot or needing a lot. I was pretty content with what I had. And I think that I've carried that same mentality for the most part growing up, even as I got older and got my first job and all of that. That's another thing too. I think a lot of people start learning those basic money skills when they get their first job when they're like 15 or 16. But we weren't. So I lived with my dad when I was of that age, and his mindset was, your job is to go to school. And granted, I was extremely busy, so I didn't really have time for a job realistically, being in track and cross country and ROTC and grades and all that stuff. So I really didn't have time to, but I remember wanting a job. But again, it was just like, your job to do well in school. So I didn't really have that experience of getting a paycheck and budgeting and knowing where to put my money in a savings account or a checking account. Like I had no knowledge of that until, later in life. But that's kind of what that was like for me. But I know you had a job in high school. So what was that like when you got your first paycheck and all of that?
Yeah, so before I got my first official job, I babysat for a
Oh yeah.
family in town, and so I actually started babysitting when I was 12.
Which is insane. I cannot imagine entrusting a what is that, sixth grader with my child. I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah, I would never.
Yeah.
I would never hire a 12-year-old to watch my child, and I remember watching I think the youngest was 2.
Oh my
So I
gosh.
remember changing diapers and things like that. I think I was 12 going on 13, but still, even that age,
Yeah.
I feel like I would be comfortable with minimum 16.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I started getting my little checks pretty early on. I remember my mom helped. So my sisters and I, we all did this. Our mom helped us open a checking account.
Mm.
We had our little debit card. I loved it. It was great. And of course, as a family, when we started going out to eat, my parents were like, "Oh, you guys can pay for yourself,"
Yeah.
which my mom has said really helped. So, yeah, I was doing that, and this was in Japan when I first started babysitting, and then when we moved to Hawaii the 3rd time, this is when my dad retired, started working for like, one family.
Mm.
My sisters and I actually rotated with the same family, so I was getting more checks there, but yes, at 16, I got my first official job at Taco Bell
Very good.
and, little W-2
Wow.
employee.
Okay, taxes.
I know. So that was cool, and so my dad worked in accounting for years and years, and so I remember him really talking to me about taxes and withholding and things like that,
Mhm.
and he actually would file my taxes. So I was in Hawaii and he was in Florida, and
Gotcha.
I don't think I still have it, but I held on to those forms for years because
Mm.
he would do it as a living, so he kinda treated me like one of his clients. So he gave me an official folder with my
Wow.
information, he would mail it.
Oh my gosh.
So I had that for years, and then eventually I was like, "Okay, I can
Yeah.
transition from my dad being my tax preparer to TurboTax."
Yeah.
But, yeah, that's how everything started with me, and I kinda started to understand things, and then transitioning going to college is when I took out loans and I learned about
Mhm.
interest and all of that. Actually, no, I took out loans for college, but when I did that, even though I signed the master promissory note, I didn't fully understand
Yeah.
interest and all of that until once you're done.
Like, "Oh my gosh, what
You
is this?"
you get that letter or email, and then it's like, "Okay."
6 months after you graduate, time to pay. Yeah.
Yes. So that was a whole thing too, and I didn't mind. I wasn't one of those people who took out loans and was like, "I'm never paying it back."
Yeah.
I
Or,
understood.
like, living on it. A lot of people took loans out just to live on,
Oh,
which was
yeah. So
yeah.
I in college, I did take out excess
Mhm.
so that I could live on, but not too much. As an
Yeah.
example, maybe I got $1,000,
Mm.
so that would be for the whole.
It's like semester.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think even the whole year.
Mm.
So, I did have a job in college, and so that was nice, but it was just like a little cushion. But yeah, after finishing 6 months, you get the notification you've gotta start paying, and I logged into my account and I saw the
Mhm.
interest amount. I was like, "Oh, okay. I'm
Yikes.
I'm never gonna pay this off. I love my life."
Yeah.
So, what about you when it comes to college and payment?
Yeah, I mean, my both my older brothers went to college before me, but they were both on a full ride scholarship through ROTC, so they didn't deal with loans or anything. So I was really the first person to navigate that world. And yeah, we didn't know anything about it because my brothers and I were the first generation to go to college even and take out these student loans. So I think for me, it seemed like, okay, I can get this money and then I'll pay it back when I have like a quote unquote real job, not knowing how insane the interest works. Cause it's not even just a matter of that percentage. It's like, 6% interest, which sounds not bad, but because it just compounds so astronomically, it gets out of control. And yeah, we didn't know what any of that meant. And nobody taught us, right? Like these loan officers or whoever was like, here, sign this line. It's like, okay, right. So like there's no education on this is what this means, this is what it is, this is what it will entail over the long run. So yeah, I was just taking loans out because I needed to. And I I didn't take loans out to live on necessarily because I lived in the dorms for the most part. And that was paid through tuition and all that. And then my mom would put like $100 in my account like a month or something like that, which sounds insane now, but that was totally enough to live on
Yeah.
for a month, right? Just like get my little Taco Bell dollar menu or my Sonic half price drinks between 2 and 4, and that was more than enough. And, every once in a while, I wanted to splurge on, like, Chili's or something. But, but yeah, so we didn't have any there was no education on financial literacy. I will say in high school, in junior ROTC, we had this unit every year. I don't know how this related to the military at all, but they would have this financial literacy course that we would take during school, like during the ROTC class, like for 4 years. It wasn't relevant to me at the time because I didn't have money to do all of this stuff with. So it's like, okay, I'm learning about money, but it's not sinking in because I'm not doing anything with it.
I have $0
Right.
in my
I'm
account.
gonna invest $0 in my 0% account or whatever. I mean, yeah, it didn't make any sense to me. But yeah, so we just kind of went into life without a roadmap of what to even do with that. Um, I wanted to ask you, like, with your family, did you know if your parents like shared finances? Do you know how they split things? If there was all just like one account, like what was that like for you?
I
If
have
you
no
know, okay,
I have no idea.
okay,
They
yeah,
didn't talk about it. I
mm-hmm,
didn't ask. Again, years later, I did find out they did have a lot of financial challenges,
mm,
but yeah, I have no clue. My guess would be that they had a joint account and they had separate
mm,
accounts, but I
okay,
not exactly sure.
gotcha. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't. They didn't talk about it either, but from what it looked like, granted, I was a kid, so I don't know. I think they had just a joint account where they just paid out of that, and like all their money went into that, and that's just kind of the money for the family. At least I think that's how it was. The reason I'm asking because I'm trying to figure out how we came to our belief system regarding finances for marriage. So I guess we can maybe jump into that. Like how when did you start formulating that idea of what you felt like a marriage should be like financially? As far as splitting versus having everything together, like what was that process for you like?
I don't know. For me, that wasn't anything that I consciously thought of.
Mm,
I wrote down a list of my finances with my partner is going to look like A, B, and
yeah.
C. However, I think if you would have asked me when I wasn't partnered up, I probably would have said, yeah, we'll have a joint account and then we each can have our individual accounts for fun money.
Mhm. Okay. Yeah. That makes sense. So there was nothing that really that influenced that. It was more just like what you felt like was logical for
Yeah.
your
And
yeah.
then maybe if I was in a situation where one of us made a substantial amount of money, then we could just live off of that person's
Mm,
salary, and then the other person's salary can go in savings or investments, things like
mhm.
that. So, yeah, I think those 2 paths were options for me, but it
Okay.
wasn't anything intricate. I'm just a very experiential person, meaning I
Yeah.
just have to be in it.
Yeah.
We gotta look at what we're working with, and then it's a conversation that I have with my partner, and that's kinda
Mhm.
how it was with you and I.
Yeah. I feel like there was probably a show that I was watching where a couple got together and this was a conversation. That's what got me thinking about it because I feel like I did come up with a version and that made sense for me early on. I was probably in high school when I determined what would make sense financially as far as a couple and their finances because I've always been on the mindset that when you're married, your money is no longer yours specifically. Like you're married, so your money is for the family, even if it's just a family of two. And for me, it made sense. And maybe this is just the way my brain formulates things. It's just easier to conceptualize that everything is in one pot, and then you split the bills up from there. So it's just one pot to get the finances out of. So I think it was mainly just easier that way in my brain. So that's what made sense to me. And that seemed fair, right? Like regardless of who made more, who made less, like all the money is going for our benefit at the end of the day. And I know there's a lot of people who have this mindset that they should have separate accounts completely and just go half and half on everything. That never felt cohesive to me. That still felt very separate as far as being in the marriage. But that's just for me. I know a lot of people that works for them, but that never really sat well with me. But as you started to experience relationships and things like that, when did you start to or did you ever really formulate like what you wanted? Was it more so just hearing what the other person wanted and seeing if that made sense for you?
Well, you're my 3rd relationship. The
Right.
first one, we were just dating, so we did not combine anything,
Mm,
and the second one was my first marriage, but we were both in grad school and broke.
Right.
So finances wasn't really an issue because there was barely any money, and I left him right after we both graduated from grad school.
Mm,
So this marriage with you is the first time where we're working professionals, we have salaries, and it's something that needs to be discussed.
mhm.
Yeah, at the end of the day, like I said, it's just about kind of being in it and like, okay, how much money do you make? Okay, how much money do I make? And what are our thoughts? And I think pretty early on, we were like, okay, yeah, once we get married, we'll combine our finances and
Mhm.
go from there.
Yeah.
But I want to go back a bit because I know you mentioned how you didn't quite understand like why people would keep their separate accounts and then pay 50-50.
Yeah.
And I would say some people probably do that for security, especially as a
Yeah.
woman,
Yeah.
because one of the biggest reasons that people stay in abusive relationships is because of financial issues.
Mhm.
They don't have access to their finances. And so I can imagine as a working woman, you probably just want to keep what's yours. You don't want
Yeah.
that person to have access. Not saying you're coming from a place of fear. It could be that, but I think it also could just be wisdom.
Yeah.
I know when I was in therapy years ago, while I was still married, one of the first things that my therapist said is get your own money.
Mhm.
And I was like, ooh, you're right. And he actually had me buy a financial book. I never got to read it because shortly after I left him, but,
Mm.
and it no longer was. I mean, I'm sure I could have learned something, but there was just a lot going on. But yeah, he was just like, "What you don't want to happen is you're in a situation where you wanna get out, but you just have no resources." And
Yeah.
fortunately, my parents lived 15 minutes down the road, and ultimately, that's where I went when I left him,
Mhm.
and my sister was in town, and I did have an incredible support system, but yeah, so that's maybe one of the reasons why people would wanna have that, and also, people have been working for years and years and
Yeah.
doing stuff a certain way, and so it could just be that too. Maybe there's not a
Yeah.
fear that it's gonna be abusive and, they're gonna be on their own, but it's just like, "No, I really value just, like, having my own stuff." I don't think it's inherently a negative thing.
Yeah. You just like you have a system down that you're just used to, and so you just stick with that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I make this amount, and I'm gonna pay for these bills, you make that amount, you're gonna pay for those bills. Cool. And also, another thing, especially as women, like, we like to shop, a lot of us, I don't, but
Yeah.
a lot of women like to go shopping or, like,
Yeah.
get your nails done, and there's these comments that guys tend to make. "Oh, that pedicure is $60, you don't need that."
Mhm.
It's all this visibility when
Yeah.
you share an account, and so I know for some women, being able to just do whatever is nice. I pay my bills,
Yeah.
I'm responsible, I budget, I've got X amount of money, and I'm gonna spend what I want. And then, like,
Yeah.
Amazon packages, I know that's a thing too. Obviously, like, you could
Yeah.
still, like, see the package when it comes to your house,
Yeah.
but it's not a bad thing to shop, obviously,
Right.
like, in and of itself. Obviously, with anything, you wanna be smart, you wanna make sure that it's in moderation and you're not,
Mhm.
like, blowing all this money. But, yeah, those are a couple reasons why I would think that people would wanna keep their accounts separate.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, you have to do what works for you, and you have to be on the same page because I think if you don't hear each other and one person just quote unquote gets their way, there's gonna be resentment there, and there's gonna be this side eyeing the whole time. And I think, finances is one of those things that gives people security, right? Because that's how the world operates, unfortunately. And if you don't feel secure in your finances, it's going to be difficult for you to feel secure in a relationship. So I think I did have a question though, switching topics. If a couple decides they're going to go 50-50 on bills, do you think the amount that each person makes should dictate how much they contribute?
Yes.
Okay. I do too, but I know some people, they think it should be 50-50 no matter what, right? So, like, if your rent or if your mortgage is $2,000 each person should pay $1,000 towards the mortgage, right? If their light bill is $300, each person should pay 150. And I get that. Like it's because I guess it's the difference between equality versus equity, right? Like contribute what you can proportional to what you make. That's what equity would be, and that's kind of where my mindset would be if that was the dynamic that we had, but some people think it's fair if everything is equal, and I just don't see it that way at all.
Yeah, I mean, if someone makes $150,000 and the other person makes 70,
Yeah.
that's not fair for
Yeah.
them to have to pay 50%. So I like the idea of instead of 50-50, let's look at our bills and see how much everything is. Maybe the person who made 70 can do groceries and the light bill,
Mhm.
and maybe the other person can do the mortgage and the car payment. So that's what I would think. But I know you're mentioning this because that's what you experienced in your first
Right.
marriage.
Yes. Yeah. First marriage was everything was 50-50, even though she was making much more than I was, and I was, struggling because and that was a situation where we were not aligned in what we wanted to do, and it was a power and control thing, and it was a safety thing. It was a safety thing for her that she had mentioned, but at the end of the day, it was a huge power imbalance with that. But yeah, I think that's something to consider whenever you are splitting finances. See how much you make and do what is fair for that person, not fair in what is equal, but what is fair proportional to what you make.
Yeah, and I think this finance conversation is so important for people to have in the beginning.
Yeah.
And I think a good question is, what's your relationship to finances?
Mhm.
Are you the type who hoards all your money and doesn't ever wanna spend anything because you have a scarcity mindset? Because maybe growing up, there was never any money, and so
Mhm.
as an adult, like, "Nope, this is not gonna happen." Are you the type who's chronically just charging the credit card no matter what? Are you the type that likes to donate it to certain
Right.
organizations? Are you a saver? You save 50% of your paycheck no matter what. It's so important to lay everything out on the table just to
Mhm.
see, because that's a big issue, like we talked about in the beginning, a reason why maybe it wouldn't work
Yeah.
because you just heard a bunch of news and you're like, no,
Yeah.
saving 50% of your paycheck no matter what, I don't really want to do that,
Yeah.
or okay, you've got to you're a shopaholic, you've got
Mhm.
issues charging the credit card with a 30% interest rate. I don't really wanna
Yeah.
be with someone who, has all this consumer debt and isn't paying it off.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's really important. But do you wanna segue now to how we do things?
Yeah. Yeah, so the way that we do things and we agreed on this pretty early on, because like you said, it's so much better to get that conversation out of the way because it's it's not it's not a deal breaker if you guys are on totally different pages. It is a deal breaker if you're on different pages and not willing to budge, right? Like,
Well, yeah,
yeah. So I
that's what I
think,
meant.
yeah, no, and I think just adding context to that because I think people may see that as a red flag, like, oh, this person is this way, this person's this way. Okay, that's not going to work out. It's like, no, it can. Just talk about it, right? You have a conversation, see if you're willing to compromise and budge. But if you're not, then at that point, like, okay, this is not going to work out because people will try to go forward anyway, and then it just blows up at the end with a lot more hurt feelings. But regarding how we do things, yeah, early on, we agreed that we would really just kind of put everything in one pot and pay out of there no matter what the bills are. It's like your bills are now my bills are now your bills, and that's what works for us.
Yeah. So Luis does all of our financial management. So about once every 2 weeks,
Mhm.
you sit down, crunch the numbers, figure everything out, and move things around
Mhm.
and whatnot. So I honestly don't see what's happening, and I'm okay with that. I know that's controversial, I guess, because there are a lot of people who are like, no, you need to have
Mhm.
visibility on the finances, but I trust you and I have access to the finances. That's a big
Yeah.
thing. I definitely would preach that. If you don't currently have access to the finances, get on that account because if stuff goes left, you don't wanna be locked out.
Yeah. Yeah, and one of the things that we do that is really helpful is we have a shared note that has our spending money. So after all the money is allocated for the bills, we have our spending money left over, and we just have a shared note that has our spending money that we just kinda track as we are going, just so we kinda know where we're at with things, and so we're not overspending. Because I think it can be easy if we're not paying attention to things to just, like, swipe and not know what's going on because it money goes a lot quicker than we think it does a lot of times if we're not keeping track of things. And I know at the beginning we weren't really tracking things, and then we were looking at what we had. And we're like, I feel like we made more money than what we have right now. What's going on? But we just weren't tracking anything. So now that we are tracking things, things are a little bit easier, and we're just on the same page. Um, so that's what works for us. I know there's probably an app out there that can do that for people. I have no idea, but this works for us, and yeah, so that's been helpful.
Yeah. And then so I own my own private practice.
Yes.
And so something that I do is I work with a company called Herd. So they do my monthly bookkeeping and then they also do taxes for the business and then for us personally.
Hmm.
I do pay for that monthly and it is an investment, but honestly, it's so great because it's just one less thing
Yeah.
that I have to do. And for those business owners out there, you just know how sticky things can be, especially taxes. We do have to still pay taxes. Taxes are
Yeah.
not taken out as we're not W-2 employees. And so for me, that's just been amazing. On that note, for any therapists who are interested, this is not sponsored at all. Wish it was. But this company I work with called Herd specifically works with therapists who have their own businesses. And so if anyone is interested, please reach out. If I get your first and last name and your email, I can go ahead and get you 1 month free, and that's a $200 value. So, let me know. As always, don't ever say we're not trying to hook you guys up because we're small and we're slowly kinda getting in the game, but we do it where we can.
Yeah, and honestly, like you said, it is a little bit of an investment, but it is so nice just knowing that it's done right.
Yeah, and on another note, you and I have a financial planner
Yeah.
that we meet with who really looks at all of our stuff and helps us out when it comes to saving and budgeting and whatnot.
Mhm.
Eventually, we'll get into investing,
Yeah.
but that's just been amazing to have a second set of eyes and ears on the
Yeah.
situation, so we're not missing anything significant.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, we know that that's a privilege, not everyone can do that, but we definitely recommend if you are able to do that, look into it because it may not be as expensive as you may think. So, if you're able to and you are interested in that, just look for someone and yeah, help out with that because it has been really helpful for us just to really sit with someone who this is their jam, this is their bread and butter, and they really just like nerd out over the finances. And like, I don't mind doing the finances on a biweekly basis, but looking at the big picture and long-term things can get overwhelming for sure, especially when you have different sources of income and all of that. So she's been really really helpful to just kind of get things more streamlined.
Yeah.
So yeah, so we can now transition to this Reddit story. She read one earlier today, and I was like, that sounds wild. We have to do this one. So you want to go ahead and read that?
Yes. Okay, this title is My Partner is in Massive Debt and I Don't Want to Take Financial Responsibility for Her and Her Kids.
Uh oh.
My partner has a huge amount of debt and she just told me about it, almost 2 years into our relationship. I feel torn. I love her and I want to support her, but at the same time, I don't want to be the one paying for the debt she accumulated due to poor financial decisions. I had an honest conversation with her and told her that financial irresponsibility is an absolute deal breaker for me. If I had known from the start that she couldn't support herself and her kids, I probably wouldn't have pursued the relationship. On top of that, I'm pretty sure she wouldn't be with me if I weren't financially stable. This also explains some previous conflicts. I make almost 3 times more than her, and in the past, she expected me to include her kids and things like vacations, dinners, and outings, which also meant I had to pay for everyone. We fought a lot about it, and I never understood why she pushed for it so much. Now I get it. She was already in massive debt and just couldn't afford anything herself. Recently, I made it very clear that I don't want to go on any trips or big outings until she takes care of her debt and is actually able to pay for her and her kids. To be clear, I have no issue covering a bigger share when we do something together since I earn more, but I don't want to be forced into planning things for all of us and then be expected to pay for everything. One big dilemma I have now, her debt means we can't travel together. Does it sound fair if I travel alone? I don't want to be held back by her financial situation, and I've worked really hard to be where I am today. Would I be an asshole for traveling on my own and setting these boundaries?
Ooh, are they married or they're just in a relationship?
No, they're just in a relationship.
Okay.
She told him about the debt 2 years in.
Yeah. Lots of things. To tell someone 2 years after you've been in a relationship, it's wild work to do that, especially when he told you that financial irresponsibility was a deal breaker. And honestly, that's probably why she didn't tell him because she knew that it was going to be the end of the relationship. But at the end of the day, it's going to come out. So it's just delaying the inevitable. And when you delay it, then you have all this other stuff you have to deal with, all the extra feelings, all of the maybe if they've combined anything together, like there's just a lot more. And there's kids, they're probably attached to him too. So you're just putting a lot of things at risk for your own preservation. I think if she was honest about it at the beginning, maybe that was something they could have worked through, like, he could have helped her come up with a plan or found her resources or something, but for her to sit on that for 2 years, and then who knows what has happened in those 2 years, maybe things have gotten worse, I don't know. That sucks. R now well, I'll let you go now, and I was gonna talk about the traveling on his own and all that. So, yeah.
I just think that honesty is the best policy, so I
Mhm.
agree with you. It should have been something she mentioned in the beginning. Having that amount of debt, and I read somewhere, I think it's $145,000.
Mm.
So, we're not sure if this is from student loans, if this is consumer debt through credit cards, we're not sure. But she knew it, and she
Yeah.
was embarrassed and didn't wanna say anything, so she sound like held off for as long as she could. That's manipulative.
Yeah, and then to have him pay for everything, it's like, what? That's a lot. I mean, granted, yeah, he makes a lot of money, it sounds like, but that's a lot of responsibility to put on someone to take care of your kids, to take your kids on these vacations and all of that. That's a lot. Like, if you wanna go on vacation with him, you pay your part. If you cannot afford the kids, find a babysitter, find your mom, find whoever can watch them. But if you can't afford it, don't go.
Yeah.
It's like, what?
Yes. I was like, "We probably should just be really dialing back and
Yeah,
understanding we gotta live within our means."
right. Yeah, I think people get this, like, instant gratification need to, like, do all of these things, and listen, we love traveling as much as anybody else, but we are not traveling to Bali if we don't have Bali money. So, I think there's a lot of things that should have happened early on, but to address his question of if he can travel on his own, honestly, I feel like if he is since he's not married, they're not, a married couple, I don't think it's wrong to travel on his own. I think he could maybe surprise her with a trip every once in a while if he wants to, like, as a gift, but if there are places that he wants to go, yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say that he should hold himself back. That might be controversial. I think, if he wants to go and he even had it planned, yeah, I'm like, well, I'm gonna go do this. I'll call you, we'll FaceTime, I'll show you pictures. That might be insult to injury, but I don't know, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's your money, you worked hard for it. Travel,
Yeah.
do what you want. He did state that financial irresponsibility is a big deal breaker, and who
Mhm.
knows why. It could be that he grew up with parents who just blew everything. They had a gambling problem, or maybe he grew up lower class and just
Mhm.
really didn't want to experience the same things that he had to witness as a kid. And
Yeah.
so he prioritized X, Y, and Z to get to this place, that's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
We all have different deal breakers. And so he's not an asshole for responding in this way and for wanting to kind of pivot and set
Mhm.
boundaries.
Yeah.
I think, especially being a man that makes that amount of money, maybe people would be like, well, he's rich and why is he complaining? No, just because you have a lot of money doesn't mean you have to spend it all
Yeah.
on all these things.
Right. Yeah, and at the end of the day, like, I think it's okay. I would say even if you are married, it's okay to want to take a trip on your own. I know one of our friends, she does that sometimes. She'll take her own solo trip, and it's been awesome for her, and they're secure enough in their relationship where it's not a big deal because it's just like mommy time. Let me go do this, right? And so I don't think it's even a matter of that. I think it would be a problem if he was gonna go on this trip on his own, but then when he's with her, he's like, "Oh, I can't afford that," or "We can't afford that." It's like, then it's a matter of priorities at that point, right? Because if he's spending all this money to go these places on his own, but he's not able to invest money in the relationship, that's another issue. But if he has the money to go on a trip and he has the money to invest in the relationship, I don't think he should feel obligated to hold himself back from that.
Yeah. No, I agree. At the end of the day, it's just a huge betrayal.
Yeah, no, 100%.
And I really wonder how it came out. Was
Yeah.
she caught? Did she sit him down and volunteer this information in a vulnerable way?
The collector's call.
Part part of me feels like she got caught.
Yeah.
It was just like, "Okay, so I have $145,000 in debt." And like you said, the dots connected. Oh, that's why I had to pay
Mhm.
for the dinners and the trips and all the things, including the kids.
Yeah, and that's 2 years worth of lying that you it's not even about the fact that you have debt at this point. It's a fact that you have the debt and you've lied consistently for 2 years. So I can imagine for him, he's just like, "If you've lied about this for 2 years, what other things have you lied about? And what other things are you capable of lying about?" Right? Like, that's just not a good way to start a relationship by any means. So, yeah, just a
Did
lot to
she
work through there.
did she lie or was it
Or maybe she didn't lie, she
lie
just never by
do you
omission.
yeah, I was like, "Do you believe in lying by omission?"
Yeah, 100% because it seems like he communicated very clearly, "This is a deal breaker for me to be financially irresponsible." And
Yes, it sounds like it was consumer debt because he said, "I don't wanna be the one paying for the debt she accumulated due to poor financial decisions."
yeah, so that sounds like consumer debt, unless she got a car she couldn't afford. I mean, I have no idea if it's a car loan that's $100,000 car for whatever reason, but I can imagine it's probably more consumer debt.
Yeah.
This makes more sense. But yeah, I think if you made it clear that that's a deal breaker, you're sitting on all this debt, I think it would at least be worth a conversation. It's like, "Hey, I have this debt. What are your thoughts on that?" And then you can have a conversation like, "How did you get that debt?" Then he can determine if that's irresponsible or because I think there is good debt, right, and not great debt and bad debt. So it sounds like it's not good debt. So yeah, I think there's definitely a lot to sift through there for him.
Yeah,
Do you think
but
the relationship is over at this point, or should it be over?
if I had to guess, I would say they probably didn't recover from this.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And it's gonna be hard because, again, they have a 2-year history and there's kids involved. Not his kids, but kids nonetheless that had been in his life. So it would be hard for the kids, but also hard for him to have to part ways with that. But at the end of the day, you have to see what you are willing to live with if you're gonna marry this person long term, and, yeah, that's just not a good way to start that. Unless she had I could see it working potentially if she had actionable steps to not only address the debt, but also address why she didn't tell the truth for so long. Like, "I'm gonna go to therapy, I need to figure out why this was so hard for me to come out with, and I really want to do right by you. And I can see it maybe working in that way, but if she's gonna get defensive, like, well, you told me that was a deal breaker and all that, and it's like, well, that's a whole different thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. Especially if she's like, I'm going to file for bankruptcy.
Hmm.
I'm going to do what I got to do to maybe switch jobs or go back to school or whatever it is so
Hmm.
I can make more income. If she really owned it,
Yeah,
then yeah, he could be like, okay, we got a plan. Sounds good. But yeah, really any other response
yeah,
I don't think wouldn't work.
yeah. Anyway, what are your guys' thoughts? What do you think about that situation? Do you think it's okay for someone to travel on their own if you're in a committed relationship? Or even if you're in a marriage, if you are okay traveling on your own, what would that do for you?
Yeah. Or would you be done?
Yeah,
Like, "Oh, I can't. I cannot go forward knowing this deep betrayal happened."
and then
If you lied about this, what else are you lying about?
yeah, and then just regarding finances, what kind of split works for you guys if you guys wanna be open about that? Or is there anything that we talked about that you guys feel like is really important for you? And I think this is also a conversation we didn't really talk about, but some people are really, really gung ho about getting debt free, and some people, they're just like, "I don't really care about being debt free, I just wanna live my life." And I think that can be a really big deal breaker too for some people. I think some people, they're just like, I want to get debt free, and their partner's like, I don't care about being debt free. And there's this huge disconnect on how to spend their money. That could be a huge conflict going down the line. So, thoughts on all of that. We were very curious to hear what your thoughts are.
Yes. And that could have been the issue with this couple.
Yeah.
Maybe he's of that mindset. I grew up with all this debt in my family and this and that. And I just vowed that I would never do that. And I had debt early on and I worked my butt off to pay it off. And he really values everybody in his life to be debt free. And homegirl comes along and lies about it. So that could very much be the reason why. But, anyways, definitely share your thoughts with us. We'd love to hear it. Please be sure to subscribe, follow, like, comment, share. We are trying to get this podcast out to as many people as possible. We appreciate all the support and we'll check in with you guys next week.
Later.